this is something I wanted to do. I just got back from seeing Guardians 3. I ate some McDonald's, so forgive me if I'm like burping or something like that. I'll try not to. Um, and I really wanted to talk about it because I have quite a few thoughts. Um, there we go. It'll clear the old throat. I have quite a lot to say. Um, I don't entirely know where to start. Guardians as a series has been really important to me. It's been there for me through literally, I would say, the worst time of my life. Uh, was almost the exact point when Guardians 2 released. I have never rewatched Guardians 2, which I feel a little bad about. I don't know if it's because of the association with that time or just the fact that that's probably going to end up being my least favorite one. But it's still very good, and I think it deserves another rewatch from me. I remember it extremely well, which is a testament to how good it is. It's also a testament to the fact that I've watched a couple YouTube reactions to it over the years. um, but now we have Guardians 3. And it's a really interesting movie in terms of James Gunn's evolution as a filmmaker, in terms of what parts of it feel like they were always planned versus what parts of it feel like they sort of been put in or changed after Gunn's career nearly ended. Um, and just in terms of its similarities to both the first and the second movie. That's something that really stuck out to me, I would say. Um, is that I would say after the intro, the movie has a very clear structure. It's like a very clear three-act structure. Third act is very long. The third act is like the second half of the movie. There's an intro, which is good. Then there's a second act, which really didn't do it for me all that much. I would wager to say it's maybe some of my least favorite stuff in the trilogy. Once again, I need to rewatch 2, but 2 is still very light and fun and enjoyable. And that sequence just wasn't so much. It felt like it should have gone a little faster. It felt like a set piece that was put in to do some cool set design that wasn't really thought out all that well. And some people, at least one reviewer I follow, has mentioned that all the cameos from like James Gunn's friends, including his wife, are like shoved into that section, which it does make it like feel a little strange. I'm not gonna lie. So that part was weird. And at that part, I was a little worried. I was like, maybe this is going to be the worst one, which I would really hate. And maybe it won't be meaningful to me like the other ones were. Um, but after they finish that section, the movie almost immediately goes steeply upwards in quality. The entire third act, which, like I said, is like the whole second half of the movie, is super good. The way it's paced, the way it's written, the visuals are incredible. Marvel movies, especially lately, have rightfully gotten a lot of flack for the visuals, not just for how they actually look when they're on the screen, but for the way that they are produced through these visual effects companies that are really put through the ringer. And I don't know what the situation with Guardians 3 was. I think James Gunn is a good guy, by all accounts. I don't think he would willingly put a VFX house to work. I know he has been really singing the praises of the VFX artist on Twitter, and he's been sharing early tests for some of the characters. Um, but whatever the background or the discussion surrounding that is, the effects in this movie are really amazing. Some of the practical makeup, which is used a huge amount in the third act, is really good and even harkens way back to like some of Gunn's really early work with both Trauma, which was sort of practical effects, makeup, grossness. And then I think he did some weird web series called Human Z, which was about some bizarre missing link sort of creature. And a lot of the makeup in this is similar to what I've seen of that, the shots I've seen of that. Um, so that's a great aspect of the third act. But just the way it's paced and plotted, and the way when the movie started getting going, and I was like, oh, I'm enjoying this. I really hope it doesn't, build up to a climax too quick, and it didn't. Like I said, second half of the movie, there's a lot of time to go, and there's a lot of great stuff in there. The climax is great. The Guardians as a team, they really shine. And I mean, this is what you're going to hear from everyone. There's, an action sequence. And it's the kind of thing that I think you're really going to start seeing in a lot of big blockbusters is visual effects, CGI, and their combination with live action, whether it's really live action or just looking live action, but used in a way that is evocative of animation, but still with the camera movement of a live action film. We saw it in a trailer before the movie for Transformers Rise of the Beasts. In all the trailers for that movie, they've been heavily showing off this like single take action sequence, which I think doesn't look great. But in this movie, there is a sequence towards the end that is really, really incredible. And even once that sequence ends, it's still incredible. I don't know how deep into spoilers I really want to go, but the part of the movie that I didn't like reminded me of Guardians 2, and the part of the movie I did like reminded me a lot of Guardians 1. Um, I think there are some specific things I could sort of say about that. I think there are several moments in the climax that are really more evocative of Guardians 1 than they are of Guardians 2. Some of them extremely intentional, others not so much. Others just more in the way it feels, uh, the way it's a little more real. There's a little more character interaction going on. The Guardians 2 finale was very CGI, crazy, heavy. They're in like the planet core, Um, and it builds and ends in such a satisfying way that is not satisfying because of like the action that happens necessarily, but is satisfying because of the way the characters act. And the third act is structured in a way where Gunn sort of knew he was going in that direction. And I guess maybe you could say this is the point where we're going to start getting into spoilers a little bit. Where like he does a big action sequence before the real finale because he knew the real finale would not be super action heavy and it would be more showcasing that the Guardians have each other's backs. And that even if the team makeup has sort of changed over the years, mostly it's growing. They are a family, they're a crew. I remember way back in the first movie, it reminded me of the crew dynamic in One Piece, and that is definitely sort of there in this movie too. I think the villain is really interesting. I think once again he is designed, and his place in the movie is designed in a way where Gunn is aware that he is there to facilitate Rocket as a character and his story and his growth, and to facilitate cool action sequences a little more than he is to be a cool character unto himself. Even so, he's pretty cool. He has a lot of great dialogue. He's genuinely scary at times. Quill calls him RoboCop, which I really appreciate because his design in the current era, they show him quite a bit in flashbacks too, is really similar to the unmasked RoboCop. And it's like, Marvel has always had a villain problem. This movie sort of understands where its villain is useful and does not try to overextend him, um, and highlight him when he maybe is not quite complex enough of a character to deserve that. Um, Unfortunately, there is a side villain character, Adam Warlock, who sort of does suffer a lot from that. I really don't understand why he's in the movie so much. That maybe feels a little bit more like either a mandate from the people in charge or something Gunn personally just wanted to put in because he liked that character but couldn't really figure out exactly how to place him, or maybe a little of both. And I think Will Poulter does a great job as Adam Warlock, using, I believe, his natural British accent, which he doesn't much in movies. Um, but the character is just kind of odd, and he just goes in and out of the movie, kind of doing his own thing, along with his mother Aisha, who I was very excited to be the villain of Guardians 2. I like. I forget how much I bought into that. I'm not going to say I bought into it because I tend to be pretty savvy with those things. I think when the movie was closer to release, I probably started realizing okay, Kurt Russell's gonna be the villain. Like, come on, like, come on. Like, he comes in the trailer, he's like dressed all nice. He's like, "Hey, Peter, I'm your dad. Yay!" It's like, okay, he's gonna be the villain. I definitely think I did realize that before the movie came out, but it still hurt that Aisha was not a bigger villain because I like Elizabeth Debicki a lot. And I think the idea of just this gold perfect queen is a cool villain. And unfortunately, she's very much a side. She's a side villain to the side villain in this movie. Um, and she's not very regal. She's been taken down a peg, and there's been some you could say somewhat hasty writing done to put her under the main villain of the movie, the High Evolutionary. Um, but yeah, another way that the third act of the movie resembles Guardians 1 is just visually. In the sequences that take place on a big ship floating over a sort of urban, brightly lit during the day planet. In Guardians 1, this was Xandar, which is like sci-fi urban. In this movie, it is like very human urban. It's like a planned community, like a development. But that was evocative of the original movie, and the parts after that are evocative of the original movie, featuring fights. Once again, getting a little more into spoilers here. Outside of Nowhere, which is a location from the first movie, was not in the second movie. Comes back in a pretty big way in the third movie in a really cool way. There's some stuff they do there that feels the way how big that whole third act goes really feels like a finale. Really feels like a finale, and you used to go, "Oh, holy crap! They're doing some really awesome stuff here." I think all the characters are balanced really well. I think Gunn, once again understands where and how much to use characters. And even though it's fun that Kraglin is a member of the team now, realistically, how much could he have to do? And Gunn puts him to the side for most of the movie, but has him go where it matters. And it's the same with Cosmo, who's sort of like his sidekick. There's some really cool stuff regarding that, and one of the major dramatic moments of the movie, and I would say that I think many fans were probably wondering whether we were going to get something like this in this movie or not, goes to Kraglin as a character during the climax. I won't go further into that, but there's a lot of that finality, as there should be. It's supposed to be the finale of the trilogy. There's a lot of moments where you can look at it and go, I, as a fan, could easily have imagined this happening. And I, as a fan, tend not to do that stuff. If you've talked to me online, you know that I generally consider myself not really speculative about stuff. I love to discuss things. I love to discuss how they are and what they mean and the choices that were made in the creation of it. But in terms of what's going to happen in the future, I don't know. My speculation takes a different form. I generally just get excited about what's to come and think about the interesting elements and where they could go without fully saying anything concrete. Which is funny because I also view myself as a pretty good predictor of things in media. However, those predictions are almost always based on my understanding of media as a whole and of the creators and how I feel like I kind of know how they write and create. That's usually what my predictions, especially the ones that come true, are based on. And so it's still, I could easily write like a video or a thesis or whatever on this, but I haven't thought about it in too much detail. I do think it all sort of gels together the way I think of that media, and that I do still generally consider myself sort of not anti-speculation, but not a speculator in the same way that many people are, or they get hyped for very specific things that they predict. I predict for the fun of it, when I feel like I've intuited into something interesting, a direction where something could go. Anyway, putting that aside, like I said, there's a lot of these moments that have a lot of finality to them. There's some really major stuff for most of the characters. Drax and Mantis as a pair, that started in Guardians 2, that continued in the really, really good holiday special, and that continues in this movie too. Nebula is sort of thrown into that trio for a lot of the movie, and they bounce off each other in really interesting ways as the ones that still sort of need a lot of development. The core Guardians team has come a long way. Peter still has some ways to go, but Rocket is interesting because I think Rocket's arc I feel like the second movie is sort of his arc a little bit, and this movie doesn't change him as a character so much as it just like explores him and how far he's come and how he got to be the way he is in the first movie. And spoilers, he's out of commission for a lot of the movie. For a lot of the movie. That's one of the things that was I think kind of cleverly hidden in the trailer. That even though the movie is his story, a lot of that story is told in flashbacks while he's dying on kind of an operating table. And that's part of what lends the movie its very dark tone. Just the fact that Rocket is in that circumstance, and then the actual flashbacks that we see, which, I mean, a lot of people have made quite a lot of discussion over the nature of those flashbacks and the sort of horrific experimented on creatures that we see in those. And once again, that is Gunn really flexing his muscle as a monster designer. He really likes monsters. He really likes monsters that are based on real animals. And he does that a lot of those in this movie, and they all look really good. And that flashback is really sad. You kind of have an idea of where it might go, but when it finally gets there, it really does hit you, and it's all showing very clearly, and it's not easy to watch. And a lot of people have said, maybe don't bring your kids to this one. I didn't hear like too much in the theater in the way of like kids crying or freaking out or just really strong audience reactions. So I think the movie is probably, parents know their children, and hopefully parents do their work these days in terms of, if I know what type of movie this generally is, I know if it's going to be okay to take my kids. Now, this movie is a little darker than the other Guardians movies, so even a parent who tries to do their homework might not really find that out unless they want to read spoilers, which I can't imagine a single parent who would want to do that. because they all must think like I do. Um, but still, in my theater, it seemed like everyone was pretty engrossed in the movie and was not uh, taken out by how dark it was, but we're just going along for the ride, which is good. So, I mean, just that whole third act really impressed me. And by the end of the movie, I was saying, like, thank you. You know, thank you for this. Thank you for the trilogy, James Gunn. He's pretty much my favorite person in Hollywood at this point. I just love the way he thinks and writes and how he seems to put a sense of fun and movement in terms of the pacing over almost everything else in his movies. And I do feel like he keeps getting better in that regard. I feel like Suicide Squad, his Suicide Squad movie, not the original, um, just for those who may not really be as into this stuff as I am, but may have still come across this video somehow. I don't know why you're watching this, but thank you. His Suicide Squad movie is really, really well paced and well told, and it's like a well-oiled machine, that movie. That I think is in terms of that kind of quality, and that goes into the character arcs and the way they're told. The natural rise and fall of a story is probably his best work, even better than this one, because like I said, this movie does not have that for all of its runtime. Guardians 1 is also very good in that regard, but that movie is not completely James Gunn's script. I think it is largely his script. I think it's really funny how some people who are not Gunn fans as much tend to, I think, overestimate the involvement of the original writer on Guardians, who wrote the script before Gunn came in and rewrote it. And Gunn directed the film still, so it is very much his own. And this, while Guardians 2, which, was Gunn writing from the start and directing, did feel quite a bit more silly than that one. This movie definitely feels like it's gone back to going somewhere in between the first movie and the second one, which is really cool. That it's sort of a fusion of those two. The second act, which I didn't like as much, is more like Guardians 2. The third act is more like Guardians 1. And it's really great. I think that's all I have to say. To go into what I believe is, a pretty huge spoiler at the very end of the movie. So, it's your final chance to turn it off, pretty much. They do intend to bring Star-Lord back, possibly in a solo project or possibly in some sort of, Secret Wars. I can only imagine that they plan on bringing Adam Warlock back too. I don't really know what his character's whole deal is in the comics, but I'm pretty sure it's not doing what they show him doing at the end of the movie. So there are plans to sort of continue some of these characters in this universe. I do think we won't see most of them again. If we do, hopefully Gunn will maybe be a little bit involved in overseeing that, as he did with Infinity War, but that's not going to happen. I just have to face that. It's not going to happen because James Gunn is now the co-CEO of DC Studios. He's on to very big things, hopefully better things. I won't be mad if if his Superman movie is better than these movies. Let's hope that all movies are as good as they possibly can be. So those are my thoughts on Guardians. If I have anything more to say, it'll be in my Letterboxd review, or I'll write it in the comments or something. Rocket is such a great character, I think. And the way, as James Gunn has said several times, that he identifies with Rocket, and the way that identification is even more meaningful when considering how his career almost ended. Because he was a harsher, more edgy person when he was younger. And that's the same arc Rocket goes through. And James Gunn has not been coy, or, he hasn't tried to hide that that's how he feels about it. And I think that's really on display in this movie. But every other character also gets a chance to shine. And the movie ends pretty much as perfectly as I could have possibly imagined. So, was not disappointing. Thank you, James Gunn, for this trilogy. I hope the MCU picks up on this stride and returns to what I would say is its former glory from here. And if you watch this, thanks for watching. But that's all for me for now. So have a good night.